Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hutchins. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Association of Nonprofits, and it's great to see you here for another edition of MANP Connects. Um, Again, my name is Jennifer Hutchins, she, her pronouns. I'm the Executive Director. And let me just run through a few of our tech tips. This program will be recorded and we'll be making audio recordings available in the next few days. Please mute yourselves and turn yourself off camera. It just helps with the facilitation of today's programming and making sure everybody can hear and see and all of that. Um, we welcome people to use the chat box. Please message one another individually, comment to the group, send in the questions. This is all about connecting and finding out how people are doing this rainy morning in the beautiful state of Maine. And thank you very much to our sponsors, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare and Eaton Peabody. We're really grateful to those organizations and companies for supporting us. And thank you to the MAMP team that makes it possible for us to bring this program. Joining with us are John Clark, who's heading up our IT and handling all of the event production from that angle, and Ellis Ivy, our new membership manager, who is critical in helping develop the content and setting up our guests for today. So big shout out to John and Ellis for being such great partners with this work. And it's wonderful to see you all here. We we decided to have this program because, as many of you, I'm sure, are aware, we're in a very unique situation for the nonprofit sector in our country with regards to a current federal administration that is taking several executive actions to challenge funding as well as specific missions and the purposes behind those missions. And I just want to mention quickly, if you don't know already, the Maine Association of Nonprofits, as well as through its partnership with the National Council of Nonprofits, is working very hard every day to provide you with the resources and information you need to feel prepared for the onslaught of actions coming out of Washington, D.C. that may impact your nonprofit or your community. So feel free to check out our resources. We have a lot of those already on our nonprofitmaine.org blog page. So that's a great place to look. And because of when we're in these types of I'm saying these types of situations like they happen all the time. But unfortunately, since 2020, it's felt a little bit like they do happen all the time. So, but I will say, in times of vulnerability and uncertainty, we have found through MANP Connects, connection and knowing you're not alone and that others in your community have your back is really, really essential. And part of that is learning how to work together collaboratively and developing partnerships. Oftentimes in the nonprofit community, we can feel very siloed and very much alone, sometimes by choice and for good reason, because we get very passionate and focused on our mission, which is super important and spot on. And sometimes we can get so focused on that mission and doing the hard work of delivering on that mission and gathering the resources we need to be successful that sometimes it's very hard for us to find the time or to really remember and think about the importance of lifting our heads up sometimes and looking around and seeing who our friends are in this work and how valuable it is to have partnerships. Some by nature of developing more community and camaraderie. Some of them are by necessity because of all the challenges that come at us from the external environment. So either way, we wanted to bring a program to you today that's highlighting a couple of partnerships that we've heard about recently that we think are really great examples of ways organizations who maybe at first you wouldn't have obviously thought they were going to be partners, but have been really successful in doing so, and also coming up with new ways of sharing resources and partnering that way. So I'm going to start with Kyle Warnock and Lydia Coburn, who are going to join me on screen for a conversation about their partnership. Hi, Kyle and Lydia. How are you this morning?
Hi,
Doing well.
morning.
Good morning. So right off the bat, would Kyle, you're from Queerly Me. You founded Queerly Me in 2020. Is that right? Did I get that
We've
right?
seen many evolutions, but we became a nonprofit in 2022.
Okay, great. Congratulations. And you have a big milestone coming up this year. You're soon going to have programming in all 16 Maine counties. Is that right?
All 16 Maine counties will be setting up LGBTQ outdoor programming, yeah, and all of them by the end of the year.
Congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
Lydia, you're the executive director of the Brunswick-Topsham Land Trust.
I'm the communications manager at the Brunswick-Topsham Land Trust. I don't want to take Steve Walker's title just yet, but
Okay, excuse me. Well, well, you know what? I'm sure you wear multiple hats.
I do. Yeah, as many of us do in the nonprofit sector.
Well, would you guys just off the bat, can you guys talk about I'll let whichever one of you wants to start. How did you guys decide to partner? Whose idea was it and how did it come to be?
Yeah, it kind of started more on a personal journey than a professional one, actually. In summer of 2021, I was hoping to make more LGBTQ friends in Maine myself. And Queerly Me at the time was a photo documentary series, mostly in the Portland area. And I had reached out to participate in the program. And that's how I met Kyle, was just through that personal connection. And shortly after, found out that Queerly was starting to do some weekend camping trips, and that intrigued me. So I asked Kyle to get a coffee and just kind of wanted to learn more. This was around the same time that I had started my role at BTLT. Um, and at the time, the Land Trust was starting to think more intentionally about how to have more inclusive programming. And pieces were just kind of fitting together in my head. It sounded like the camping trips with Queerly were going really well. There was definitely a lot of interest, but some barriers in terms of time. Not everyone can take a full weekend to go camping. Sometimes it's financial. It can also just be really intimidating to sign up for a camping trip with a bunch of people you don't know. But there was definitely interest in wanting to gather outdoors with the LGBTQ community in Maine. So I said, what if we have trails, you have this demographic of folks that want to connect. What if we tried to do a pilot program? So in fall of 2021, we had a foraging walk, was our first event. And we had registration filled up really quick. We had a wait list of like 20 or 30 people, and programming just kind of kicked off from there. So it happened pretty organically. The Trail Mixer program that we run now is not really a guided educational walk. It's much more informal, just meant to get people connecting outdoors on the trails. But it's been really successful, and it's been a really nice partnership that's definitely aided both of our missions in a really productive way.
Yeah,
That's
Queerly Me
really
has
cool.
seen
Yeah. Go
many
ahead.
different evolutions.
Yeah.
Lydia first reached out. Our group's name was Queers of Greater Portland. And like Lydia mentioned, we were a photo documentary during the height of COVID. And so that's where that 2020 timeline comes from.
Mm.
And we had done outdoor camping trips as a way to fill a gap in the community. There weren't a lot of outdoor spaces for LGBTQ people at the time in Maine, at least not outdoor spaces that felt safe and comfortable and affirming. And so it was very serendipitous at the time. We were developing programming as an informal group. Lydia reached out with this idea to do day programming, which was not something we had explored before. And since then, our day programming has flourished, and we've evolved into what is now Queerly Me. And so together we've sort of built up this really robust community network that fosters strong support networks and builds community belonging in a way that is so needed right now in Maine.
And Kyle, can you talk a little bit about it sounds like it was really successful right off the bat in terms of putting yourself in the shoes of people who might be listening and wondering how to do this type of programming. Were there any, and this is really a question for both of you again, but I'll start with you, Kyle. Like, were there areas of tension that you had to kind of be creative and think through? What were some of the lessons that might be helpful to other people listening in terms of how to approach a partnership like this?
We were fortunate enough to have already developed a pretty interconnected community network through this photo documentary. And so our community audience was already fairly large. With Lydia reaching out to be a part of the photo documentary too, we had established a connection beforehand of mutual understanding and an interest in getting involved. And so that relationship was already built before we even established programming together. And through that level of like trust and understanding, programming came naturally and pretty smoothly. I think while there weren't any obvious tensions, we had to take into account our individual capacity. At the time, Queerly Me was an informal group, and so we did not have nonprofit status, and we had limited resources. And so sharing the responsibility of creating programming between us really led to effective gatherings. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think a big thing that really helped us in the beginning stages and really throughout the past 3 years has been really effective communication, both before, during, and after programming. I think every nonprofit, as we all know, are really strapped for capacity, resources, time, things like that. And outside of the individual event or program that you're trying to do collaboratively, there's a lot of other things going on in the nonprofit. So we'll often do like pre-season check-ins and just get coffee and say, what's going on with Queerly? What's happening with the land trust? Big picture, what's going on with funding or your staff or other goals going on, just so that we're more aware of what's happening in our own siloed worlds. So that way, when we do come together for that collaboration, I think there's just greater adaptability and problem solving and kind of creativity and just kind of empathy too of understanding the big picture and how our program kind of fits into the bigger context. And then of course, understanding each other's different communication styles and protocols and confidentiality policies and marketing timelines. And, everyone's got their own systems for how to work. So I think, Kyle, you're being very nice. It was mostly very smooth in the beginning. There were 1 or 2 moments of us needing to just say, oh, I thought I was going to do that. Or, oh, are you, so just kind of teasing out, responsibility and delegation and making sure that we're not competing. We're working together as best we can within the larger context of the organization and just respecting each other's work styles too.
Did you ever have a moment where you needed to really say, okay, this is my mission. This is the mission of Queerly Me. This is the mission of the Land Trust, and here's how they overlap? Or was it more of an organic, we just know this is the right thing to do? Do you know what I mean? Did you ever have that conversation?
Not really. That's a good question. I think, and I'll let you speak to this because I think clearly, you've been forming through these past 5 years. So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are in relation to this. I think for the Land Trust, it was really obvious that, part of our mission is inclusive recreational programming and getting people outdoors and connecting them to nature. And, being our communications and marketing person, I'm trying to spread that word as best I can. But I think a huge piece of, the conservation movement and outdoor industry is that it hasn't always been very inclusive. So having a partnership with Queerly where their target demographic and audience is a marginalized community and is the LGBTQIA+ community, that was such a natural fit of just, we got to meet the people where they are. And, if we want to have this programming and want to have this representation of these people outdoors enjoying the trails and enjoying nature, I don't think it was an intentional thought to partner. It just made sense to try to do that. But I'm curious how your mission has formed in this kind of process.
Yeah, so Queerly Me's mission is to foster strong support networks and strengthen community belonging for LGBTQ adults in Maine. And we do that through visibility, resource accessibility, and community building outdoors. Our partnership was pretty natural, I think in part because the Land Trust had an LGBTQ representative in place to work with the community directly.
A good point. So there was already a stated official intention.
Yes, or just some mutual understanding as far as what the community needed and what we could develop in partnership as community members. When it comes to other partnerships we develop, we try and strongly emphasize the need for solidarity and the need for an openness to have more difficult conversations around oppression that marginalized communities face in the outdoors. And I think that's vital in developing programming collaboratively to set a foundation where there is understanding and openness and a willing to learn as we develop these gatherings across many different land trusts in the state. But land trusts partnerships for us have been so valuable because an enormous or just a significant resource that we need to access is land. We need a place to gather on. And often gathering alone or in small groups does not feel safe enough for LGBTQ people outside. And so we have an organized effort and a collaborative effort in place. We can really best ensure that these spaces are as comfortable and affirming as possible. And so
Yeah.
land was a big thing, but representation was also a big factor in how this partnership developed.
Talk a little bit more about representation. What do you mean by specifically? What do you mean by that? If you're an organization and you want to take on some of these ideas, what does that literally mean?
Yeah, there is a difference in developing a collaboration between an allied organization and an organization that has LGBTQ representatives. And that is mostly based on what education needs to happen before we can move forward in programming. Depending on what trainings are available to organizations, depending on the workers of that organization and their lived experiences, we're going to approach programming differently. Especially when you're looking at developing details and logistics around the event, what's going to be best for the community we serve. If we're working with an organization where that representation isn't present, there's going to be a bit of pre-education work to do beforehand, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think it's an important point, right? Because an organization may have the intention, right, of wanting to reach out to a different group. It doesn't matter what they represent, but not necessarily understand that there might be some educating that would be beneficial in advance. What do you think about that, Lydia? Was it fairly easy for you to bring along the land trust and what partnership you wanted to create, or did you find that you needed to have some conversations with people to have them understand why this was an important step to take?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And I think I was not expecting the level of like personal impact this was going to have on me just in my own relationship with my own identity as an LGBTQ person. I think it's put me much more in the forefront in being out, so to speak, because it's, you kind of put yourself in the position of like, now I'm the representative of this community on behalf of my nonprofit and doing this partnership work that I love immensely. And it's been such an amazing, like almost transformative experience the last few years in helping to co-create this program with Clearly. I think the Land Trust was and is very supportive of it. I think I'm flashing back to that first summer together. I think their hesitancy wasn't in partnering with an LGBTQIA plus group. The hesitancy was partnering with, like, you guys weren't even a nonprofit yet. It was kind of this informal group of people. And it was like, well, is there compensation involved? Like, what are the hours look like? It was more logistical, figuring out what this looks like. I think once the programs proved to be really popular and really filling that need and a really successful way to have more inclusive programming on behalf of the Land Trust and get more folks outside and get more folks familiar with our trails and forming really genuine connections and friendships, there's been nothing but support from the Land Trust to do it. But I think something that we talk a lot about that I think is still kind of an ongoing consideration, I guess, is if I were to leave the Land Trust, would this programming still continue? What does it look like when the collaboration is as strong as it is because of the two individuals, not necessarily because of the organization as a whole? I don't think that's any reason to not do this type of programming, but I think it's a really important component of it because, I think it has been successful because I'm representing the Land Trust and a part of the LGBTQ plus community and able to hold this space with Kyle out on the trails. But if I wasn't there, what does that relationship look like between the two nonprofits?
Can I add?
Yeah, that's important. Wait, go ahead. Yeah.
And that's a real, yeah, important point. That's where solidarity comes in. That's where an openness to learn comes in. Um, we are partnering with dozens of organizations, and we're very fortunate to have the capacity to do that. And all of those partnerships start with, hey, are you open to have these dialogues? Are you open to stand in solidarity with us, not just for this program, but within your organization, in everything you do, in your work? Is there an ingrained sense of equity and inclusion and diversity? Um, and so we've established such a strong organizational relationship that I see us going forward with programming, regardless of the makeup of the org, but that's through a lot of conversation, communication, agreements, you know, going through that process to develop trust between the two orgs.
And so can you talk about a little bit about how the two constituents may be receiving the program so far? Just in terms of, do you have an example or two of maybe a couple of like impacts, examples that you can tell from the two organizations?
I have one.
Go for it.
We started Trail Mixers in 2021. So we've been doing this for 4 years.
Almost, yeah.
Seasonally, 3 trail mixers in 2 seasons each year. So the fall and the spring, typically.
Sorry to cut you up. Should we explain kind of like Trail Mixer 101 when we say trail
probably
mixer?
should.
We explain
Yeah,
what
that's
that
fine.
is?
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
good idea. And I'll
Sure.
also ask you guys if people are interested in learning more, if they
Yeah.
can reach out or how they can reach out. But go ahead. Yes.
Yeah.
What is a trail mixer?
Okay. So a trail mixer is basically a really informal walk on the trails. We all gather at the trailhead. We don't have registration. It's free to attend. You can be as spontaneous and show up, come as you are at the day and time. And we do some little intros and then we go out and walk on the trails, and we have these silly little fun icebreaker questions that we pause every, once in a while on the trail and pose a question, and folks find someone to talk to and answer that question with. And it feels a little silly the first couple of questions, but to me, I love hearing the volume of the group get louder and louder as the walk goes on, because everyone's kind of loosening up and getting comfortable. And we encourage people to find a new person to talk to for each question. So they'll ask their question, talk about their favorite bird, or if they had a superpower, what would it be, or whatever, walk along the trails, and then we'll pause and ask a new question and find a new person. So it's really just meant to get people talking to new people. And afterwards, we usually gather at Wild Oats afterwards to just kind of have some more time to connect. And that was really a product of seeing so many people linger at the trailhead for like 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, because people just wanted more time to chat, which was a delightful problem to have. So now we typically gather somewhere afterwards just to kind of share a meal and hang out together and have some more time. But yeah, they're super fun. They're every spring and every fall. We'll share more information later, but back to you.
No, it's okay.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks,
Yeah.
Lydia.
We have seen 35 participants on average per trail mixer in the past 4 years, roughly. Mm-hmm. Following the election results, we had a trail mixer about a week later, and we saw 75 participants.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Which,
can I say where it was?
Yeah.
We've attempted to, so the Land Trust has about a dozen public access properties, and they're all beautiful in their own right. Some are on the coast, some are in the forest, some are more in wetlands. Like, they're beautiful. So we've attempted to have the trail mixers at different locations to help folks get familiar with the different public access trails that they can go to any other time that they might want to explore outdoors. So the November 2024 trail mixer was at Androscoggin Woods in Topsham, which the parking lot, let's just say, does not accommodate 75 folks coming out on the trails, and the parking was a real fun adventure to try to navigate. So now we typically only have them at Crystal Spring Farm because there's adequate parking there.
Oh boy.
It gets a little redundant on the trails occasionally, but just in order to have access for enough people to park safely.
Yeah.
We've had
Yeah.
to troubleshoot, but anyway.
Yeah.
Again, what an amazing issue
Yeah.
to have, that we saw that increase so suddenly as a direct
Yeah.
reaction to election results. LGBTQ people do not feel safe right now.
Right.
And being given the opportunity to gather and not just connect and form strong support networks and build connections between people, but to find opportunities to then engage in collective action, to engage in local organizing is incredible. And we've seen that as a result of our trail mixers. We've seen people who have developed close long-term relationships on the trails, who come to every trail mixer regularly. We've seen game nights form out of these trail mixers and smaller organizational efforts. This is an incredible space that we've created where people are truly able to network with each other and know that there is a base level of understanding that I am showing up as I am, and that is without the constraints of binary identity or heteronormative ideology. I am showing up authentically, and I can because people support me in this space. And I will add one thing, which is that trail mixers are our most popular program, and we've expanded them across the state as of this year. And without our partnership to Brunswick-Topsham Land Trust, this program would likely not exist in the form that it exists in. So yes, you are taking a chance on informal groups that are not necessarily nonprofits, but you can uplift those groups with your resources, with your capacity, so that they can get to a point where they can continue their work to often serve marginalized communities like we have and the way we have out on the trails. And that's super cool.
I just want to
That is
throw
really
in one smidgen thing too. The
Yeah.
100% to everything you just said, all of that value in gathering in that space, but also just gathering in nature, which is just such a healing and safe space. There can
Right.
be and should be for everyone, and experiencing joy together. I think, you know, the importance of still gathering and laughing together and making friends and getting excited over a toad we all found, you know, having this curiosity in the outdoors can just be really healing and rejuvenating also. So community organizing and advocating and networking is tremendously valuable, but I think also just existing and being joyful together in nature is really profound as well.
Well, I really appreciate, I'm sorry that I don't have more time, but I just want to lift up what I'm hearing from your experiences. One is relationship building. You guys started with trust and a mutual set of values, and that I think is really key. And then you quickly moved to understanding what your intentions and goals were and objectives, right? And figured out how to do that. You named and you weren't afraid of naming the challenges involved, and not even like challenges like it was this big tension, but as you said, Lydia, you know, it's like organizations have to be careful what kind of partnerships they go into. I mean, it's called good management to ask hard questions about, well, is this going to pull you too much away from all the other things we have to do this year? Like, that's all very important and important to elevate and think about. And then I'm just delighted that there is this alignment of missions about being in the outdoors and then providing an opportunity for a marginalized group to feel more included. And they're just sitting so closely together. And I just love it. And you've really come back around to understanding that it comes back down to community and joy, right? Which is definitely embedded in both organizations. So hats off to both of you for sticking with it through your friendship and your colleagueship. And we're all better off for it here in our state. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that if there are groups out there that want to learn a little more, that they could contact either one of you to get a little bit, and maybe they want to invite Kyle up to a different part of the state, because certainly I know land trusts are always looking for who's going to steward the land into the future, right? And so cultivating new across people to communities that they may not have relationships with is just a smart idea, right? So So thank you both for your time. It was really great talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jen.
Okay, take care. Destie, want to talk to me for a few minutes before we start our Friday?
Yes. Hi. And for some reason,
Hi.
having a hard time getting my camera on, but I'm on my
That's
way.
okay. That's okay. I can just keep talking to you. Well, and I can introduce you. Destie Hohman Sprague is in the executive director of the Maine Women's Lobby, and she's been working in the field of women's and girls' rights and issues for a number of years now. And now she's heading up the Maine Women's Lobby. And you are developing some really interesting partnerships, and you have a vision for how like-minded. I don't know how you're going to have to tell me how you decide how you want to collaborate, but how are you doing? What are you doing? And tell me a little more about your vision.
Okay. Hi. So happy to be here.
Hi.
And hello,
Aw.
big crowd. Kyle, Lydia, that was so great and informative, and many of the same themes that I can also share. So Jennifer, you invited me to talk about the Operations Alliance that Maine Women's Lobby and Hardy Girls are building. So many folks may be familiar with Maine Women's Lobby. If you're not, we do legislative advocacy for gender equity since 1978. And Hardy Girls empowers girls and non-binary youth to cause a ruckus in their communities. So slightly different missions and efforts, but as you can tell, really like aligned. Causing a ruckus can be legislative advocacy.
I know a few people w'ho'd love to join you in that.
We welcome all.
Right? The more the merrier, right? Let's cause a ruckus.
Yeah, so our organizations have worked together on Girls' Day at the State House for many years in a partnership that echoes many of the themes that we just heard from Kyle and Lydia. But over the last year and a half, we have been moving toward not just partnering on that programming, but partnering on some of our core operations work. So we are both very small, 5 or fewer nonprofits without a national back end that might provide many of those core operations functions that nonprofits need to do. I'm talking, bookkeeping and financials, HR, benefits management, the grants calendar, not the grants content, but the like what's due when, which is really a calendaring function. And so, those tasks just take up a bunch of time, whether it is for 3 staff or for 15 staff. It kind of still takes the same amount of time to get your paperwork filed and reconcile your books. Our thought was that we could take some of the best skills that already existed within our organizations and pool those to keep our operations running more smoothly. And so over the last year, we have been moving toward that shared staffing model for some of those operations functions. Best example being finances. One finance person who is really good at financial management doing the books and reconciliations on both sides of the house.
And so how's it going?
It's a big effort, and it's kind of a strange model. I know that it's not something that is really typical or has been done, but our feeling was that we both identify as feminist organizations. So really,
How important has that been, actually? How important is it for you that your missions align?
I think that the mission alignment isn't so much the key as the values alignment around being feminist organizations. So it's not
And so
about
talk a little bit about that. What does that mean?
yeah, it's not about serving women and girls as much as the idea of having a philosophy of collaboration and abundance.
Mm.
But it is baked into our work that we do better by pooling resources. And that's really a feminist ideal. You do not have to be a feminist necessarily to also believe that, but we happen to. So we're starting from the place of feeling that we get better by teaming up. We get better by sharing, by collaboration, and by not having a model of like competing for resources, but pooling resources to build more.
And so it's that again, it's a abundance versus scarcity mindset is what I'm guessing is you're saying. And so it's this idea that there's enough out there. We don't have to be fighting over this little bit of scrappiness that sometimes in the nonprofit sector we have cultivated this idea that there's only so much money out there and we all have to fight to get it in some arena of gladiator sensibility. And you're saying it's really approaching it from a different mindset.
Yeah, I think so. And, that scarcity can sometimes come in like a form of, we have a great bookkeeper and we need to keep her. And so maybe we aren't telling people about our great bookkeeper or our great personnel policies or great models or like, and so, we're starting from a place of like, what if we have a great bookkeeper and we share her so that our partner organization then also has a great bookkeeper? And that's the best example of some of the work we're doing. We had a person on one side of the house who was really just tight with finances, one on the other side who does great sort of personnel, a good set of personnel policies and HR and benefits management. And so we're bringing those together so that both organizations have the best of what we have to offer.
And so in terms of, if you put on the hat of someone who might be curious about it, exploring this type of shared operations model, you've already mentioned sharing some values. Are there other critical success factors that you might highlight for them that they might want to think about before engaging in trying out something like this?
Yeah, well, a lot of what I heard Kyle and Lydia mention, the sticky points are often logistics. I think Lydia said that. So, starting with trust, with the idea that this can work and with the willingness to stick it out through the sticky logistical parts. We now have built a memorandum of understanding and sort of a cost sharing model that gets us there and makes it pretty easy. In the day-to-day, bookkeeper is just sort of billing out which organization they happen to be working for in the moment. For organizations listening in who have a C3 and a C4 component, this probably sounds pretty familiar to you. This is how 501c3 and C4 partnerships work. You just bill to the right organization and reconcile at the end of the month. We at Women's Lobby were already doing that. So we knew that was a thing that works. We just took that model and brought in a new organization.
Oh, yes. You are already familiar with that concept.
Yeah, like cost sharing is pretty straightforward.
Right.
But it does mean having like really open, commitment to the future and then communication and logistics as you get through with doing that with more than one organization.
Yeah.
They also mentioned keeping an eye on like the personal relationships versus the organizational relationships. And that's I think that's an important part here is, I won't be in this role forever. This can't be like the Destie show or with, one board chair who really believes in it or one treasurer. It has to be organization to organization relationships at lots of different points along the way. So
there might be ways that you can make some of the arrangements systemic so that, even though I would love to see the Destie soap actually produced, And Hollywood might be your next stop there, Destie. But yeah, I thought about that with Kyle and Lydia too. How do you go about um, formalizing a relationship so that you know it goes beyond the personal?
Yeah, I mean, we are trying to make sure that there are lots of different personal relationships along the way. So, like our board chairs, connect periodically. Our different staffing teams are connecting
Mm,
periodically. We have a little operations team that includes operations folks from both sides. Um, but then more formal arrangements like making sure that our financial teams, because this is really a financial arrangement, are meeting, our treasurers are meeting on a quarterly basis briefly, just to make sure that like all of the books are in order,
mm, mm.
so that it is a formal sort of process and expectation alongside the relational expectations.
That's so important. Yeah, what you're saying is that it really is, because I could see this happening too with a couple of smaller organizations where it's like, well, Destie's keeping an eye on that. Like Destie's keeping an eye on that relationship, but you've clearly made it the responsibility of other members of the team, which is what is so unique and special in my mind about a nonprofit, is that there are multiple points of entry for people to feel ownership over the mission and the community benefit, right? And so clearly that's a really great point, Destie. It's not just Destie manages the Hardy Girls relationship. It's right. It's like the Maine Women's Lobby and Hardy Girls are stewarding this relationship together through multiple touch points within the organization, it sounds like.
Mhm. Right. And hopefully in ways that over time reduce the burden of labor. Right now, because we're building something new, it's a big investment.
That's
Um,
another key point.
that's normal. I
Right.
expect that in a few months, we will be at the place where we are starting to see really the benefits of that investment with the reduced sort of burden of labor.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because it's true. I've heard that oftentimes people in the early phases of it's like onboarding new staff, right? You're not necessarily going to see the benefits of that person until they've had a chance to really get engaged in the organization, understand the mission, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes, and the other thing I've seen is sometimes people wait too late to cultivate these types of potential partnerships, and then they get in a crisis and they don't have the time to make a long-term investment for exactly what you're talking about. I'm
Yeah.
so glad you brought that up because those of us who it's actually the good time, and I'm testing this theory with you, Destie, but a good time to be exploring these types of partnerships is when your organization is actually quite healthy or in a relatively good place rather than in one of crisis, because then you can start. What do you think of that?
I I totally agree. I think, because we actually, I've been at the Maine Women's Lobby for 5 years. I have been working now with Hardy Girls for about 15 months. But but 5 years at the lobby has like we're stable, relatively comfortable, meeting our mission, good, strong team who have been there for a few years. Like we were really in a place to be exploring something more novel like this. And so we started specifically looking for partnerships like this with the idea
Hmm.
that that was how we were going to build the long-term sustainability of our organization, but also the long-term sustainability of a feminist movement in Maine.
Yeah, that's great. Destie, I pushed us to the very limit with you because I was getting so
Okay.
much good content with you and Lydia and Kyle. It's really great. Can people reach out to you if they want to know more? Thank you. We'll put the Maine Women's Lobby information in the chat if we haven't already. Hey everybody, it is 9:45. If you get a chance in the chat before you go anywhere, give a little bit of love to these three wonderful people who are doing really good, smart things to build community engagement and create a little ruckus either in Augusta or the woods. I love Maine. God. Hey, thanks to Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Thanks to all of you for coming. We appreciate you all. And keep your eye out for our community forum on March 31st at noon. We're going to have a community forum dedicated entirely to what's going on in Washington and how MAMP is here to help Maine nonprofits get through this uncertain time. Great to see you all. I hope you get dry later, and we'll see you next time on MANP Connects. Take care. Have a happy Friday.